Hello art friends, it's Kristine from Kristine Art, and today we're diving into the wonderful world of fall decor, pumpkin time with my family, and painting in the studio. First, we're diving into a kaleidoscope of colors at the hardware store, hand-picking mums and potted flowers to infuse our porch with autumn's warmth. These blooms are like bursts of happiness, ready to transform our space into a cozy fall heaven.
Okay, where are we going?
We're going to take pumpkins from Maru.
Now picture this, a scenic drive to a charming pumpkin farm, where every pumpkin holds a promise of adventure. Our little explorers are on a quest for the perfect pumpkins, and the joy in their hearts is contagious. The kiddos have found their pumpkin pals, and each one unique, just like them.
Today we're making decorations here for Halloween and autumn festivities.
Watch as we weave our creativity into a mesmerizing tapestry of fall, shaping a porch that welcomes the season with open arms. And there you have it, a front porch that feels like a portal to fall magic.
Okay, decoration part is finished. We both have red noses because it's quite cold outside. And I will also choose something from frontside porch decorations to paint in my sketchbook.
And what could that be? I really like these pink berries. They look like cranberries. They are decorative, so I'm not sure that they are eatable. I also like this cabbage. Some leaves of the cabbage are already eaten by snails. They are a lot during autumn time, but I really like these colors. They're so beautiful. So I think I will take one of these leaves and cranberries. Maybe together they will make a nice composition, because here we have pinks and here we have also pinks and violets. So maybe put them together. Let's see. Back in my studio, tea, candle, and creativity can begin. Line drawing is transferred to original paper, which I'm using from my sketchbook 300 GSM watercolor hot pressed paper. After transferring line drawing, I'm going over with 0.3 mechanical pencil to make lines super small and fine, and also I'm not pushing too hard so I can erase easily. When we are transferring outline, we are capturing all the smallest details, not skipping a thing. Starting the painting process with round synthetic brush, applying water to first enlarged cranberry that we have in the front side in the middle, and starting with permanent rose and a little touch of Sennelier red. Also, I will be using Indian yellow to my watercolor mix. I can see in the shadow area that there are some warmer yellows. Perlin violet in the shadow area, smoothing the applied layer. This tutorial is filmed on table easel. It's vertical, and sorry for my head getting into the video screen. This is first time I'm recording in this placement when the original painting is in front of me. This is the most convenient way to paint. Also, your ratio of water will be tested during this painting session if you will use a vertical version of your painting process, because my amount of water is just enough for paper to get moist, and I can place my paper completely vertical and nothing is dripping away, nothing is floating down. So you can see here my water amount, how much I'm using it, and how can I control no matter how paper is placed. Moving on to the next cranberry, which is much lighter, and we can see that from the reference. It's lighter, cooler, and there are some violets. I'm adding Perlin violets, but super transparent. As this is a sketchbook page and this painting is a little test of new approach, mixed media, I will be adding gouache later. I'm not too worried here about the results. Sketchbook is allowing us to be less stressful about the end result, how everything is gonna turn out. It's just a sketchbook page, so I'm not placing this original, for example, for sale or being participating in some exhibition or contest. This is for me, for trying new approach. I'm not too worried about how smooth are my watercolor layers. I know that after these watercolors there will go gouache, and gouache is more opaque pigment, but this watercolor layers I will have only few layers, and they will be my guide for tonal values, for color tone. And again, this is just an experiment, which I always suggest for you. Experiment more. While you are experimenting, you will find your artistic voice. You will find the best technique that serves for your style. It doesn't mean that only my approach is the best, or maybe other tutor approach is the best. We all have amazing techniques, and only through experimenting, trying, testing, you will find what will be best for you. Using permanent rose and Sennelier red, you can use cadmium red with some pink pigment. These cranberries are decorative, they're not eatable, and they are pink, but in the shadow they're warmer, so there may be more red, a little bit yellow. The darkest shadow are more darker violets. You can use Perlin maroon or Perlin violet. Just be really careful with Perlin violet, it can go too dark too fast. And leaving lighter parts wider from the very first layers. It is important, no matter in which medium are you working, gouache or watercolors. Of course, on gouache you can use later white pigment, but nothing is better than the surface of the paper, which is completely white compared to even the whitest pigment of gouache. Here's a closer view. I'm painting with round synthetic brush, applying permanent rose with Sennelier red transparent layer to make shadows more contrasty, separate these two cranberries. And again, when I'm separating something, I'm not outlining the cranberry I want to separate. For example, this middle one. I'm making shadow on the left cranberry more visible, and that way I'm separating these two cranberries. No need to add darker lines. It's all about shadows, tonal values. Here I'm adding Indian yellow with Sennelier red, a little bit more warmer. I see that in a reference that those pink cranberries appear more pinker in the lightest areas, but in shadow they're more like red cranberries. But again, that's just because they're warmer in the shadow area. Smoothing with round synthetic brush, but again, as you can see, my layers of watercolors are not so smooth because this is not the end, and we will be painting even more, layering more. For the furthest cranberry that we have in the bag, which is pale and violet, I'm using finer tip brush and perlin violet with a little touch of permanent rose. But again, this is really transparent layer of perlin violet, just a little touch of perlin violet to get it right, not so dark. And we are making something darker gradually. We don't want to go 100% strong pigment, then it can go too dark too fast. I'm checking my work, it's completely dry, and I'm erasing some graphite lines that are still visible. It's not so important because I will be painting with gouache and it will all be covered, but I think I'm just get used to this process that after a few layers I go over with eraser and erase some still visible graphite lines. You can do it, but be sure that the paper is like 1000% dry at this point when you are erasing, otherwise you can damage your paper surface. Making shadows more contrasty, Indian yellows, Sennelier red, a little bit of permanent rose. Starting with greens, and green leaves are so beautiful. Cranberries have beautiful leaves. They're small but detailed and have a thickness, which we can see that dark line on the edge. It's the thickness of the leaves. And I'm using sap green with a little touch of lemon yellow, and for the shadow I add perlin green to this mix. Constantly checking in reference, applying first layer. For the darkest areas of the stems, I use a mix of perlin green, perlin violet, Indian yellow. This makes a beautiful brown which has some violets and greens in it. And for the stem that is at the lower part, it works nicely, but be very careful with this dark watercolor mix. We don't want to have some brush strokes inside the cranberries where we have much lighter area. Painting rest of the leaves, adding second layer for the ones that are already painted, and covering all the green parts transparently, lightly, nothing too accurate. This is your time. You can experiment. You can paint looser. You can even, after this watercolor first 2 layers, you can use colored pencils. Experiment with this work. Do it in a sketchbook so you don't feel bad if it's not turned out as you planned. It's a test. It's experiment. For this part of the stem, I'm using watercolors of alizarin crimson, Indian yellow, and sap green. I can see from the reference that this part of the stem has some red tones and also green ones. So Indian yellow, alizarin crimson, and sap green transparently, leaving the middle part of the stem lighter, where we still need to have tonal values if we want to stick to realistic painting. Even when we are painting looser and experimenting, I still have basics that I use, like tonal values, contrast. I can paint looser, but still the result will be obvious that this is realistic, and it's a fruit, it's a cranberry.
Now all my layers of watercolors are dry. I have my reference right beside me, and I'm using flat brush, synthetic flat brush, and gouache paints, going with wide brush strokes, with confident brush strokes, using pink gouache with a little touch of red pigment. And here you can really experiment with medium. You can continue with watercolors. You can try gouache if you have it. You can use colored pencils. Adding layer of red pigment together with yellow gouache. Lower part is warmer, more reddish. And here's a closer look. Gouache paints are also quite similar to watercolors. As I'm applying layer, I'm washing my brush, cleaning in paper towel, and smoothing the applied layer if I need it to make my brush stroke smoother. But there's also a style for realistic painting when gouache is used quite with those big and confident brush strokes, and leaving those brush strokes as they are. It looks a little bit maybe like rustic style, but still in the terms of realistic painting, you can experiment. You can really experiment here. You can even, with these gouache layer, you can add another medium, colored pencil, add some shine with yellow colored pencil, or maybe darker lines with violet colored pencil. Taking violet gouache pigment, and I have gouache paints in my mixing ceramic palette together with watercolors. So sometimes I pick some gouache, sometimes I pick watercolors. It's a more freer approach, and I'm again not too concentrated on the end result. I'm experimenting here with this enlarged composition, framed composition, and mixed media.
Starting with background. Using flat synthetic brush and gouache paints, I took blue, pink, and yellow mixed together until I get a really dark gray gouache mix. Added white gouache paint, and I have this warm gray mix. I want to say watercolor mix, but this is a gouache mix. And you can use these three pigments, yellow, blue, and pink, and adjust. Maybe you want it to be more to the green side or to the violet side, cooler, warmer. You can experiment. You can even try maybe a black background with using charcoals or graphite pencils. Try. This is your tutorial to experiment. I'm allowing you. We are not sticking to botanical painting rules. We are just playing around with pigments, mediums. Also, how you apply pigment layer. You can try smoother approach, or maybe you want to experiment with brush strokes, more broader, wider. Experiment, 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 experiment. And as I'm sticking still to realistic, I'm really careful painted around all those little leaves and stems. I don't want to lose them. Going over with lemon yellow over leaves, adding a little bit shine. Yellow watercolor pigment is giving this beautiful shine, and I feel that I'm lacking here in this painting. Also some darker lines of greens, building contrast for the leaves. Now I have my whole composition background. I can compare the whole painting to my reference, what is required, maybe some more layers for leaves, or maybe cranberries could have another layer of gouache, or maybe colored pencil, or maybe you could add even graphite interesting lines to your painting. Try it. Adding final touches to this composition, to this painting. Be careful with outer edges, we still want to stick to realistic art. Adding some contrast. Now we have all composition and we can compare and add some final touches. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary fall adventure.